Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is For Pause in a Book. I make book and lifestyle related content, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today we are going to be talking about some books that you can use to host a book club. Book clubs are a staple in the book community, but not only in the book community, but like also just in life. There are a lot of people that have book clubs that might not be like in the book journal. I think that the recommendations that I'm going to be giving today actually may not be as great of recommendations for BookTube, because we tend to like have maybe a little bit more niche books, like there are books in a series or classics or like popular books, like hyped books, new books maybe. And the ones that I'm going to be talking about are going to be more of like cater to the general public, if that makes sense. And I think there's a couple of criteria that you really want to focus on when you're talking about a book for a book club pick, whether that be in person, on the internet. I think that there is, like obviously you have to take into account like who your audience is, who your group is, and things like that. But as a general rule, there's two things that you really need in a book club book. The first one being, it's got to be a good story. It's got to have like, it's either got to have a lot of drama or a lot of like plot twist, or like something that like as a collective group of people, you kind of feel in the know. You have that like water cooler talk of like, catching the show last night or whatever. That's like a thing of the past. So a really good story, plot twists, surprise endings, reveals, maybe a character that we can like genuinely love or genuinely hate, like as a collective group of people. So that's an important thing when you're talking about a book club book. And then the second thing would be like a discussion, like discussion topics to move the book club along. So social commentary, always a great one. Talking about diversity, talking about experiences other than your own. And at that point, you can really go outside the box and find some really great representation in books. So I have a couple that I think that will cater to not necessarily people that are on BookTube, because like, let's be honest, we'll read anything. I have friends that say like, hey, we're going to read this book. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's do it. So that's not necessarily us. This is your library book club. This is your work book club. That kind of stuff. That's what we're looking for here. So if maybe your office has decided that, oh, you're a reader, why don't you do a book club? Why don't you pick the next book that a few of us will read on Friday mornings? Maybe this is the video for you then. Most of these books are adult books. Again, book club, like especially in-person book clubs tend to be adults. So I did put one YA on here, but I don't think that it reads YA, which is why I put it on here, and it's definitely a conversation of social commentary. And the other thing that I really tried to steer towards was real world experiences. There's only one book on here that even has a slight fantastical sci-fi element to it. But again, it has a lot of discussion points, so I'm putting it on this list. One of the things that I think of when I think of a book club book pick is a thriller. I think that thrillers are really great book club picks because it has a lot of drama and it has a lot of like that like anticipatory reveals and like red herrings and things like that. And so it makes for great discussion when everybody finishes it. And also everyone who finishes it kind of feels like in the know. They feel like, important. They're like, oh, I know how the story ends, that kind of thing. So again, it's that like water cooler talk, water cooler conversations. So I have three here that I think would be really great book club picks that are pretty easy to read, and they're also very accessible as far as readability and in thrillers, which I think most thrillers tend to be pretty accessible for even people that don't read a lot. But these three, I think they have some homage to classics, but also they're really entertaining books. So we have No Exit by Taylor Adams. This book is a snowed-in thriller about a girl who pulls off at a rest stop in a snowstorm between Colorado and Utah, and In the back of someone's van that's at the rest stop, she finds a little girl in a cage. So she goes into the rest stop and she has to try to figure out who belongs to that car, why there's a child in there, and it is such an adventurous thing. This book reads so quickly. I have recommended it to people who don't read that often, and they've really, really enjoyed it. So this is definitely one that I think would be really entertaining for a lot of people. And there are so many red herrings in this book. So especially if you kind of meet several times throughout reading this book, the discussion topics for halfway through the book would be phenomenal and just so entertaining. Then we have Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Riley Sager's a very accessible author in general. I don't think that any of his books are a bad choice. Lock Every Door would be also a fantastic one. But for the same reason, this has a lot of red herrings. This has a lot of conversation between, is this a paranormal book? What is going on? Is it a thriller? Who's responsible? This also pays a lot of homage to some classics. This has a very similar vibe to The Haunting of Hill House, but also there are some little Easter eggs to Stephen King. There is a pet cemetery that she finds, and I think it has some The Shining vibes. So I think that this one would be great for people that maybe don't read a lot, but everyone knows who Stephen King is. Everyone knows those stories, even if it's just because they watched the movie. So this one again would be very accessible to people, and again very entertaining. I read this book in 24 hours. It was so good. It's also another book that has a lot of red herrings, and a book that as you go on, you think it's the end and then it's not the end. So there's a lot of twists. And then another thriller that I genuinely loved was The Passengers by John Mars. This one I think would be really interesting because there's a lot of characters in this book, and you're not you're supposed to kind of root for them, but then there's some that are just horrible humans and you're just I hate you. So this is definitely one where collectively your whole group of people can really love a character or really hate a character, and I think that would be some great discussion topics. Then I have a couple of books that are full-on drama. Would be fantastic. This is essentially watching a drama on TV and talking about it, and so again, great discussion topics. The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna I think is such a universally loved book. This book is about a family who moves to Alaska, and it has to basically survive off of the land, and her father has PTSD from being a war veteran, and it is the little girl's story as she grows up and kind of becomes a teenager and a young woman, trying to survive in the wilderness of Alaska, which is, not a great place for people to live, especially back in the 70s, I think. Yeah, 1974. This book is really heartbreaking. It's really touching. And so for that, I think would make a great book club book. Taylor Jenkins Reid would be a fantastic author to use for book clubs. Malibu Rising is pure drama. Just pure reality TV type drama, which is great for conversations. This book is about a family who is pretty famous. The kids are famous surfers, I think. They live in Malibu. They throw this big, huge party every single year with celebrities that come in. So it's it's a whole thing. So it goes back and forth from that night of them prepping and planning the party, and then there is a timeline that is basically the family starting. And as they are kids. This book is definitely controversial, and I think there are some people that really, really love it and some people that really, really hate it. I think it was a good book. It's not fantastic. It's not the best thing she's ever written, but it's a fun book, and for that reason, I think it's a really good book club book. However, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is probably the best thing that she wrote, arguably. And this is just, everyone should read this. I will personally push this book on everybody. So it's a good book club book. It's a good everything book. But it does have a lot of commentary in it. This is about if you don't know what Evelyn Hugo is about, it's about a Hollywood starlet who is a woman of color, basically has to morph herself into what Hollywood wants at a very young age so that she can be successful, and success is the only thing that she is interested in. And this book basically is her at the end of her life, asking a journalist to write her autobiography, or write her biography. And so this is about her 7 husbands and who her true love was. So this is a beautiful book. It has got a lot of drama in it, a lot of conversation, but it's also a great social commentary because it does talk a lot about LGBTQ representation in Hollywood in the 60s and 70s and 80s. The very first book club online that I was ever a part of was created by a couple of friends, and I was asked to join in, and we picked The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. First off, I would like to mention that this cover is beautiful and it's like very fall vibes. Not that it's fall right now, it's spring, but we're here for it. This is about 4 kids who see this fortune teller, and the fortune teller tells them the date of their death. And then the timeline branches off into the different kids' lives as adults up until the day that they were supposed to die based on the fortune teller. And I think that this book had a really great conversation starter in that if you knew the date of your death, would you live life differently? And I think that like within our book club group, that was a fantastic discussion. We had a live show on it, and it was a really interesting time, and I actually really liked this book. It also has some really great LGBTQ representation. It talks about the AIDS crisis in the 80s in San Francisco. A great conversation starter. There was some drama, but this is definitely more of a commentary than anything else. One that has both commentary and drama would be Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This is another book that I read as not an in-person book club, but not a booktube book club, if that makes sense. This is about a woman who has a PhD in astronomy, I think. Like she's a very smart woman in STEM, which we love. And so she is celebrating her new PhD by going to Vegas, and then she marries a girl. Like, doesn't know her, just blindly knows her. This is not a romance, but it has a romance in it, which I think is great for a book club because it appeals to a wider demographic. There's nothing wrong with romance books, but you do kind of alienate some people in a book club group if you're talking about a romance, if they don't read romance. Which is fine, also. So this definitely has a romance in it, but it's not a romance. It's more about self-discovery, finding herself, finding out who she is, what direction she wants her life to take, while also trying to find out, more about her new life. I have to put this on here. It was my favorite book of last year, and that's The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This was a book club book pick for our Avengers reading challenge, and we had a fascinating live show on it. And I think that this one is one that you definitely have to warn people about because it does start with a suicide attempt. So if someone's not in a good headspace, this might not be the book for them. However, I think by the end of it, even someone who is struggling with depression can really gain something from this book because I think this book is really hopeful. This is about a woman who is just very done with life. She attempts suicide at the very beginning of the book, and she enters the Midnight Library, which is the place between life and death. And she's able to take books off of the shelf, which are points in her life that where she made a decision, and she can jump into a life where she made that decision differently. So, one of her lives she was an Olympic swimmer. One of them she was in a band in Brazil. And so there's a lot of different conversations about making choices and how to live your life differently, that kind of stuff. I think this book was extremely hopeful, despite it being a fantastical type book, really realistic as far as the mental health is concerned. Now, we did have a lot of conversation about this book and depression because there are definitely some people that didn't feel like it was great depression representation. I feel like it was good. But again, everybody's situation, everybody's experience with mental illnesses is very different. And so one person's expression of it or representation of it might be very different than another person's. So Go into that knowing that, but I loved this book. Lastly, I have 2 books that are stories about people that have very different life experiences, at least, than me as a white woman. And I think that that's really important when you're talking about a book club book pick, is to find something that's not your life story. Because you can read all day about white women. There's a lot of books about white women. So I think it's really important to find books that are outside of your comfort zone, outside of your story, your life experiences. And so these 2 books are like placeholders for that. We have Firekeepers' Daughter by Angeline Boulley. This was probably one of the most successful book club books that we had for the Avengers last year. This is the only young adult book on this list. This is about an Indigenous girl. Her father was Indigenous, her mother is white, but she's very involved in her community, which is really great, despite her father not being in the picture. So, and then this girl actually gets kind of roped into an investigation into like a drug ring because her members of her community have been targeted. This was fantastic representation. There was so much about her community and her culture that was easily digestible. Like it wasn't something that she was trying to like beat someone over the head with, but at the same time this book was not really written for white people, so it just felt natural to learn about this stuff. I did do a little bit of research on some of the cultural aspects of it, and I loved this book. This actually made one of my top books of the year. And lastly, we have The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is about 2 sisters who go off and to live very separate lives. One of them stays in her community that she had grown up with. And then one of the girls, her skin is actually so light, despite being a person of color, that she passes as a white person, and not even like the person she marries knows where she came from, knows anything about her history. And it's about these 2 people reconnecting after years and years, and like their stories leading up to that point. This is definitely a story where like their life experiences are very different than my own, and I really appreciated learning bits and pieces about their lives and their backgrounds and their histories and things like that. So this one I think has so many conversation starters, so many things that are points of discussion that would be fantastic for a book club. Those are a few books, I didn't count them, those are a few books that might be great for a book club, should you be the one to decide what book to read at your office book club or your church book club or whatever the case may be. Hopefully I helped you. Let me know a book that you would recommend me if I was starting a book club. So, and we'll talk to you down in the comments below. That is all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below the video, and all of the other links to my social media will be in the description below if you'd like to be my friend on any other platform. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.